Hello and welcome to the podcast Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Coonahan, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey. I've been saying 10 years, but we're in a new year here, so 11 years, and continue to work on it every single day. Percent of the profits from this podcast will be put towards child hunger, with initial focus on the poor suburban America, East Cleveland, Ohio, which is an area that we've actually already started some programming in that neighborhood to start doing some education there. So as a reminder, please subscribe to this podcast. Subscriptions are the lifeblood of any podcast. Our sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen. Think of Cleveland Kitchen as providing easy gut health with their fermented foods, which means better brain health with just 2 forkfuls a day. On this episode, we're grateful to have Gabriel Cian, all the way from Aux-en-Provence in France, a city that my wife and I have visited and enjoyed. We've talked about longevity many times in the show before, but Gabriel brings a different perspective. He's a serial entrepreneur in the tech space and a longevity enthusiast. He spent the first 40 years of his life creating startups in the tech space. He is now spending the next 40 years to defeat aging. In this episode, we'll talk about his foundation, his new startup, and his online healthspan service. Welcome, Gabriel.
Hello, Ken, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm super excited to share with the people who listen to your podcast the different things I've been working on and my convictions, and also my plan to defeat aging by 2060.
Which is an amazing, ambitious plan, might I say.
Thank you.
I just always kind of open up the show. We were talking about the recipe at the end, but just kind of asking the question what you had for breakfast this morning.
Oh, it's going to be very easy. I do intermittent fasting and I didn't have any breakfast this morning.
Coffee, tea?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A tea, to be honest. A green tea, because it's the one which have the most antioxidants amongst all the different species of teas.
Okay. I've been drinking green tea as of late as well, so for that very reason. So what the intermittent fasting, is that kind of give us a view of what, and I'm sure this will play into more of the conversation here, but kind of how you are doing your intermittent fast. There's a lot of definitions out there. So
Yeah, absolutely. So the one which works the best for me is the 16-8 intermittent fasting, which means that I eat during 8 hours a day, most frequently for lunch and dinner. And I then skip any meal between roughly 8 p.m. and 1 or 2. 8 p.m. Yes, and 1 or 2 p.m. the day afterwards.
Okay. So your first big meal's lunch, I assume.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, nice.
Absolutely. I've done this for the wrong reasons. I've done the right things for the wrong reasons, to be honest. When I was a teenager, I always wanted to sleep 15 minutes more. And as a result, I ended up skipping breakfast, and it became a sort of habit, which, decades after, I understood it was a very good habit to take for, to optimize autophagy and longevity in general.
Very nice. So by accident. A lot of things happen by accident.
A lot of things happen by accident, especially in the scientific world. Most of these scientific breakthroughs have been discovered by accident.
So you have a math and engineering degree. I have an engineering degree as well. You founded and sold 2 successful startups, one involved in online marketplaces for software and web projects, and the second was a SaaS application using big data and AI to find professional email addresses of anyone on Earth. So why did you create and then sell both of those organizations?
Yeah, so first of all, entrepreneurship was in my DNA. From the starting point as a kid, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I would accept all, the difficult moments and efforts and lack of gratitude until I become successful in this field. So this is why I have created them. It's been a long and difficult journey. I ended up succeeding in what I was aiming at doing. Why I sold them. So I always had this idea of spending half of my life to grow as much as possible my wealth and achieve financial independence, financial freedom. and I ended up succeeding very well in this field. And then I wanted also to devote a part of my life to something that is meaningful to me beyond looking for financial returns. And at that time, so I was 40. I was in sync with my plan, and I was reaching, like statistically speaking, the middle of my life, considering that we all live, say, 80 years in good health if we take care of our health, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent a year after I sold my last startup in 2021, 2022, thinking of what would be my next project. So there were different options on the table. One of them being what I would call transhumanism. At that point, I didn't have a very clear view of what it means. Another one was clean tech and energy transition. We have so many problems today in the world related to this
Mm-hmm.
aspect. And the third one was about democracy and governance. As we know, democracy is challenged right now by different other options, other systems, which seem to be very successful also. And it was important for me to make sure that democracy is still moving forward in the
Mm-hmm.
world. So out of those different options, longevity became very quickly something that I became more and more interested about. First of all, because the research and the ongoing pace of research is so quick, and we are working right now as we speak on projects that are so cutting edge, so incredible, so looking like science fiction, but it's not science fiction anymore, it's reality or close to reality, that I was absolutely surprised that nobody would talk about this in mainstream media. So it's not a secret, it's hiding in plain sight. So you can find that information. But at the same time, no one is reading it because we are
Yeah.
talking about economic growth, about political turmoil, and different things that are, of course, important. But what about our lives? What about how long we live in good health? What about,
Mm-hmm.
the metabolic disease, which turns out to concern like a third of the world population? All those things are so important and nobody's talking about them. So I spent a year or so trying to understand whether this is marketing bullshit or it's reality. It's legit science. Talked to so many entrepreneurs in the field, to so many scientists, doctors, and I came up to the conclusion that it's there, and we can do so many things as of today. And there's so many there are so many treatments that will be available in the next 15, 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I was like, right now we have the AI revolution, which is unfolding in front of our eyes, and everyone's talking about this. It's all rage, fine. But what's hiding right now, a little bit in the shadows of artificial intelligence, is the revolution in living organisms, in longevity. And I really wanted to be part of this revolution and to contribute to the best of my abilities to it. So this is how I came into longevity. And this is how I started really executed on very tangible and concrete plans in this and projects in this space. So I don't know if it answers your question, but that's sort of my story, my personal story.
Yeah, it does answer the question. I'm just curious because you're right. There's not a lot of in the U.S. anyways. At least I'll say on social media. I'm not sure about mainstream media, but at least on social media, there's a lot of conversation about longevity now, which a couple of years ago I would say was pretty much non-existent. So there is a lot of conversation. Given the election we just had in the U.S., there's actually the gentleman that's nominated to be Health and Human Services scares a lot of people and excites a lot of people, depending on who you talk to. So and he does have a focus kind of on this, kind of the chronic disease, metabolic health, and, I'll say a food forward thought process. Because in the U.S. here, and I guess that's the thing that fascinates me. I mean, we've been to France a couple of times, we've been to Italy several times, a couple other countries. You do things differently there, and your metabolic health seems to be better. And people health in the US here is actually, our health span is declining, it's not increasing. So it was in the US, it increased for like 150 years. The last decade and a half, it's been declining. There was just a report a couple of weeks ago, somebody said, well, we're seeing improvement, but it's not going in the right direction. So that's what kind of fascinates me about your work and the fact that you're located in Europe, which seems to just think about some of these problems very differently. So yes, you did answer my question.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, to be honest, neither North America nor Europe are at the cutting edge of what we can do in preventative health and healthy living and healthy food. I think there are some countries, and for good reasons, that are really much farther away in this field. I'm thinking about different countries that have very low birth rates, that are wealthy in general, and
Hmm.
given that they have such a big demographic problem, longevity is sort of their emergency, their urgent priority right now, and
Hmm.
they're really moving at a very at a great pace to do what needs to be done in terms of standards of living, of lifestyle, preventative medicine, health checkups, and stuff like that for the general population. And unfortunately, Europe is not top of mind when I'm saying this. I'm thinking more of countries like Singapore or South Korea. Again, things have an explanation because their birth rates are zero point 0.7 or zero point 0.9 kids per wife. It's
Hmm.
children. It's like not even half of what it's supposed to be.
Right.
And in Singapore, I happen to know the situation pretty well. The average age of population is above 50 or 55 or something. Sorry for the approximation, but just to say that it's a big emergency for them, and so they're really putting a lot of resources into that. And by the way, they got very positive results when it comes to health span for the
Mm.
general population. So yes, to your point, I understand US still has things to improve in the field. Europe
Mm.
also, maybe different things, maybe not to the same degree. But again, I think we need to look at the champions in the world right now and find some inspiration there.
So what are they doing like in Singapore? Since you seem to have what are they doing
So
differently
yeah, so
from a
so
health
so
stand?
basically, what they've done is hire the best longevity experts in the world, which happen to be American. One of them being Brian Kennedy. I don't know if you've heard of him. He's been director of the Buck Institute for a couple of years before joining the Singapore University
Hmm.
out there to work on specifically on this topic. And it's very interesting for him to be in a country that put so many resources into place for this. So that was one important thing, to take the best people in the world and put them out there and give them the mission to increase the population health span, which they are able to measure pretty objectively.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Something else, they have progressively increased the price to own a car, and because to reduce pollution. And now there's like between 10 and 15% of the population which owns a car. Of course, they have greatly improved public transportation to compensate
Hmm.
for that. But
Hmm.
overall, there's been a public policy in this direction that has been very, very successful. And none of the like other countries, to my knowledge, have been successful. Maybe the Northern Europe countries are successful in the field, but it's still the exception, not the rule.
Hmm.
And then the food. I mean, the food. And to your point, I mean, this is one of your preferred topics. Is so important, and it's so difficult to eat healthy outside of your home. In some situation, even inside your home, but
Hmm.
outside of your home. I live in one of the best or most reputable countries when it comes to food, but still, you get out to eat in a restaurant and you don't know what you're eating. Basically, they're putting sugar everywhere. And
Hmm.
it's even worse than when you go to the grocery store to buy something, because at least out there you see on the package the like the content of sugar. But when you eat in a restaurant, you don't have that information, and everything that seems to be healthy still isn't, because of those ingredients they're putting inside without telling you anything. So in Singapore, things are completely different, and the country and the government really understood how important it was to take care of everything related to longevity, not only healthcare or eating or physical activity or medical checkups. It's a 360 degrees process, and they're looking at each and every aspect.
Wow. That is pretty impressive. I mean, I've been hearing positive things about Singapore for years. I didn't know specifically about the efforts they're making in the longevity space, though.
Yeah, it's again, it's nothing is perfect nowhere. It's not a democracy, so they are taking decisions, the right decisions, and it's great. But
Hmm.
at the same time, they also have the right governance to implement those measures right away, which wouldn't be possible in democracy such as in France or other countries. So yeah, I think it's also part of the equation.
Interesting. So you have now three startups in this longevity space. Each one is focused on defeating aging by 2060. So my first question is, define what you mean by that? Defeating aging by
Sure,
aging.
sure. So very, very good question. Thank you very much because many people ask this because it's a big statement, but
Is a
at the
very
same
big
time, you need
state.
to understand exactly what it hides behind. So you've maybe heard of a notion called longevity escape velocity.
Yes.
Yeah. So for your audience, the main idea is that as science goes further, understanding the mechanisms of aging, we understand at the molecular and cellular level how we need to deal with those mechanisms of aging, and we are starting to become successful in slowing them down, stopping them, or even reversing them in some
Hmm.
situation. So this notion of longevity escape velocity, what it means is that every year that passes by, you're older by 1 year, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Chronologically. But if every year that passes by, science and medicine are making so much progress that they give you access to treatments that allow you to increase your, how do you call this, your health span likelihood by 1 year, you end up having a very interesting dynamic where every year you're 1 year older, but
Hmm.
every year science allows you to live 1 year older compared to the previous year. So by that time, statistically speaking, of course, you could have accidents, bad things could still happen. But statistically speaking, you could live as long as you want to, because as
Hmm.
you get older, you get access to treatments that didn't exist before and allow you to live even longer. And you have a never-ending process that, could go forever. And you end up in a very magical situation, I would say, where you decide how much you want to live, or society, for political reasons, whatever. But it's not a condition related to humans anymore. It's a decision that we as a society would take whether we want to live longer or shorter. By
Sure.
2060, my point is that we would reach this longevity escape velocity
Hmm.
where we are able to extend our lives as years pass by at a faster pace than the chronological time passing.
Okay.
That's the very definition of what I mean by defeat aging by 2060.
Okay. So you're not saying you're going to figure out how to live forever by the year 2060. You're saying you're going to be able to increase, like you were talking
Yes,
about.
yes, absolutely. I'm trying
Okay.
to make my statement and my purpose as practical and realistic as possible. It's also, ambitious for good reason.
Right.
But at the same time, yeah, if we haven't discovered the secret to like uh, the magic recipe for infinite life, at least we have this technology which allows us to discover things faster than we age.
Yeah, and I guess they have found creatures that live hundreds of years. They've found creatures that I think something was a jellyfish or something in the ocean that never dies. I mean,
Never
there
dies.
are
Yeah.
other living beings out there that have kind of figured this out, I guess. So,
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, in nature, you have such situations and you have some animals that defy the laws of aging. I'm talking about naked rat mole, for example, whose likelihood to die doesn't increase with age,
hmm.
as it happens with humans. You're more likely to die next year when you're 70 than when you're 20.
Right.
But for the naked red moles, it doesn't happen like that. They have a linear likelihood to die wherever their age. So it's counterintuitive, but it exists in nature. We are still trying to uncover the secrets of such mysterious
Well, and
organisms.
yeah. So when you're talking about Singapore, and so I mean, this is an opinion, not this isn't backed by research necessarily, but people expect once they reach a certain age, I don't know, pick 65, 75, whatever, they just expect that they're not going to live much longer. It's an attitude thing as well. I mean, there's food, there's sleep, there's exercise, there's all kind, medical things that can be done, but it's just, so I think also talking about this and saying you're not predestined to die at the age of 70 or 80. I mean, you could live to 100, you could live to, whatever, based on kind of what your this longevity escape philosophy. So I guess my point is, if you have a different attitude about getting older, you're also going to be able to increase your lifespan.
Absolutely, absolutely. The mindset is so important.
Yes.
So important in the mix of different things that you need to take care of in order to extend your health span.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the startups that you're involved in. So you've got the 2060 Foundation. So I guess let's start there and kind of maybe cover what that's about.
Yes. So this is the organization that best encompasses the whole project that I'm working on. So you see, in longevity, I spent a lot of time understanding how this ecosystem was working and what were the bottlenecks and how we could sort of increase the pace of research to benefit from those treatments as quickly as possible. And in this space, there are two ecosystems. One of them is what I would call the health span ecosystem. That's about very practical stuff that we can do on a daily basis to address, our health on the long term. And this could successfully add 10, 20, maybe 30 years of additional healthy life for the people, which is a great deal already. And we kind of already have the technologies. We know exactly what we need to do, but still for different reasons, people don't apply this, right? So it's a very practical and very short-term plan and measures that anyone can understand, governments, people to put into practice. And basically, again, if you want to get a feeling of what this looks like, look at what's happening in Singapore or South Korea. In South Korea, for example, they have clinics where their tagline is live 100 years in good health. So it's not science fiction. It's not marketing. It's like government is doing this for the people. So it makes sense, right? So that's one ecosystem. And then you have another one, which is much more cutting edge. And those people are saying, I don't want to live 10 or 20 years more in good health. I want to live 150 years or 200 years or however. I don't even want to put a limit. And for that, you need to tinker with the human biology and to understand, how those mechanisms of aging are working on a cellular level. And at that point, I'm talking about gene therapy. I'm talking about stem cell therapy. I'm talking about organ transplantation, regeneration. I'm talking about cellular rejuvenation. Those things are really cutting edge and they look like science fiction. And those two ecosystems, I would say, should be in partnership to move the needle forward when it comes to longevity. But again, in reality, they are pretty separate, and the people don't think in the same way, and they're not really collaborating together. So for me, the 2060 Foundation encompasses the whole view, either the short term, like the health span, and also the lifespan optimization. And what we need to do there is have a long-term view, but also fueled by the short-term actions that are going to generate revenue for the long-term plans to be able to have the resources to be successful. More precisely, what I'm doing with the 2060 Foundation, first and foremost, is an investment club that is going to generate return on investment, just any investment fund, by investing into longevity startups. And with this, what we are doing is invest today in the biotechnologies of tomorrow. When I say tomorrow, I'm talking about the next 10, 15, 20 years. So in order to do this, we need to create startups that are profitable right now in longevity. And use that profit to invest in long-term projects that are bared by the 2060 Foundation. So the 2060 Foundation is, again, this investment club right now. and a certain number of actions when it comes to political advocacy. What needs to be changed in more or less all the countries in the world are two things. First is how governments invest in preventative medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, in different countries, most of the countries, France for sure, there is no money in preventative medicine. So basically, what they tell you is as long as nothing hurts and you don't have any symptoms, you're in good health. And when something hurts, take an appointment to your doctor and he's going to give you some pills. And by the way, when this happens, it's already reversible. You might be already unhealthy. You might have a cancer. You might have a type 2 diabetes. You might have so many things that were preventable if you had chosen to apply preventative medicine, but are not. So that needs to be changed. Governments need to massively invest into preventative medicine, and this needs to be changed. It's not easy. It's going to take a lot of time, but there has to be somebody to take care of this. And I want to contribute to this goal. Second important goal is to define aging as a disease, because when you do this, there's considerable amounts of public funding that right now are being invested into chronic diseases. But like the source of all those diseases is the process of aging itself. You have cancer most of the time when you're old, not when you're young. And so happens for the rest of the chronic diseases. So once you have defined this from the legal point of view as a disease, aging, then you have access to massive public funding and to lots of researchers who are going to devote their energy and intelligence to understand the mechanisms of aging. Today, less than 1% of the general public funding goes to research on aging because of this specific reason. We don't consider aging as a disease, so we don't invest in things that are not a disease. So I suppose it's going to take 10, 15 years maybe until we get some opportunities to change those laws and those mindsets. But again, we need to take care of this and to start working on this right now. And this is what we're doing with the 2060 Foundation. So again, investors who want to live healthy and want to have access to future technologies, invest in them today in startups. This generates profit for the public advocacy projects we are working on with 2060, the 2060 Foundation. So this is the whole thing we are doing with the foundation.
On the foundation, so I guess I want to kind of do an analogy here and then kind of ask a follow-up question to that. So to me, it's like when you talk about the preventative piece, it's kind of like if you own an automobile and you just drive it until it breaks, your expense for fixing it is going to be much more significant than if you take it in for regular maintenance, say every 12 months. And so right now, the healthcare system is like, we know how to fix the broken person if they have cancer or heart disease or a broken leg or whatever the ailment happens to be, versus trying to upfront, like you're saying, preventative. How do you diagnose early or give advice on lifestyle so you don't get cancer or heart disease or whatever the chronic disease or other ailment might be? So I guess that's just my interpretation of kind of what, if you agree with that.
Absolutely. I'm totally in sync with you, and I think things are happening in the wrong direction and in the wrong order right now for many reasons. Again, I'm not saying that it's abnormal for this to happen, but we are in a process, we're in a transition, and we have to accelerate that transition to healthier living and preventative medicine.
Absolutely. And then the follow-up question is, so for the foundation, the investing part, how are you identifying what to invest in?
Yeah, good question. So, it's basically investment fund methodology. In every investment fund, you have an investment thesis. For us, it's longevity. And you would have a deal flow, and you would be as vocal and as visible as possible on the internet and in the different places where startups happen to hang out and to get to know about you. And then we have this process where we allow them to pitch in front of our investors. And then we have an investment committee which decides whether it's a good opportunity or not from the scientific point of view, legal point of view, and also entrepreneurship and financial point of view. So there's many different aspects we're trying to look at. And sometimes we do deals with other investment funds that are in the space, that have themselves their own expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And again, by the way, the number of people who are really knowledgeable about the field are pretty few in the world, and everyone knows them when you're in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we are trying to work with them to have their advice and their opinion on different startups.
Yeah, I think I've accepted. You have an invite sometime in the next couple of weeks to kind of like one of the investment, like somebody's presenting. I think you've sent out a invite for that.
Yes, yes. If you have signed up, I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's emailing. I don't know exactly all the people I'm sending emails to related to this, all the people who are interested, but yeah, highly likely.
Yeah. So I'll be joining one of those. I'm just curious, kind of how that's gonna go.
You're welcome. I'm super excited to welcome you on those. And by the way, it's an excellent opportunity to get to know the different technologies that
Yeah.
those startups are working on. Some of them are really science fiction. It's
Mm-hmm.
totally crazy.
So the second company you started is something called the Startup Studio. So maybe talk a little bit about what that's about.
Yes, yes. So if you really want to disrupt this field, basically what you need is like any project, what makes it successful? You
Mm-hmm.
need three things. First, you need the right people. Second, you need the right resources. Third, you need the right technology. So
Mm-hmm.
everything, when it comes to longevity, things are not different.
Mm-hmm.
And like like the first resource I told you about is about people.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens that in longevity, we need more exceptional entrepreneurs who understand and who work hand in hand with the scientists. And we need to convince more entrepreneurs to work in those in this field. So in order to do this, the startup studio is exactly about this. So that is basically what I'm doing, and I'm an exit entrepreneur, exit founder myself. So when I sold my last startup, I had three questions on my mind. First, how do I rebalance my life? Because most of the time, entrepreneurs are working like crazy for years, maybe decades, and you have that crazy period of due diligence before the acquisition, which is even harder than the rest of the time. So you end up completely with an unbalanced life, unbalanced health. You didn't take care of your kids. By the way, when my number two was born, I was on the phone with the United States with the one of the people who were working on the acquisition. So yeah. So one, how do you rebalance your life? Second, what's your next venture? What's your next project going to be? And
Mm-hmm.
third, how do I invest my money? Most of us, when we sell our first startup, don't have any education about wealth management and investment. So basically, what I'm doing right now is reaching out to entrepreneurs who have recently exited their companies and telling them, "Hey, I can answer your three questions. I know them by heart because I've been there, and I can answer your three questions. One, how do I rebalance my life? So one of the components is to take care of your health, which you have neglected for so much time, so long. Second, where do I invest my money? Part of the money you invest, put it into longevity. It's an
Mm-hmm.
excellent investment opportunity. And by the way, you're also going to have a secondary effect, which is to have access to treatments that you cannot even imagine today.
Mm-hmm.
And second, what's your next project? You have so many projects in longevity that need to be implemented with so many brilliant scientists who need your entrepreneurial knowledge
Mm-hmm.
and expertise, team up together and create companies. So that's what the startup studio about. It's
Okay.
about finding the right entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
pairing them with brilliant scientists, and funding them to create profitable longevity startups. This is how you create the ecosystem, and this is how you create also the credibility for investors to get into the field and invest more money.
Okay. And so it sounds like you're proactively reaching out to people, like you say, people that have recently exited a startup.
Absolutely. The right audience for us is entrepreneurs, exited entrepreneurs,
Mm-hmm.
because they have the time. All of a sudden, they are sort of reborn in a new world, which is the world of financial freedom, and they most of them and most of the time they are crazy on entrepreneurship. It's their passion. So they want to start something over again. And by the way, they can also invest in promising longevity startups, which is also part of the equation.
Interesting. That's very cool.
Thank
So
you.
the third company that you started is the online service using AI, which I'm actually taking a course. I just took the first session on Wednesday that I cannot believe how much I learned in 2 hours about AI that I had absolutely no idea existed out there. I mean, it is, I mean, people talk about it all the time. They talk about NVIDIA and they talk about their market, but I mean, there is some real substance to what is out in the marketplace that anybody can access. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I
It's
guess
unbelievable.
what are you trying to do with your specific venture there?
Yeah, absolutely. Our vision, like in the 90s, Bill Gates had this vision, one computer in every household. And fast forward 25 to 35 five years, we look in the present. I have like 4 computers and my wife has 2. So, he over succeeded in
Yes.
this vision. So in a similar way, our vision is one longevity consultation per month for the 3 billion people that are age 40 and more today in the world.
Hmm.
So it's a long-term
Wow.
vision, not easy again. But
Okay.
again, in the 90s, it was not easy to imagine that you would have a computer in every house.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what we are trying to achieve. In order to achieve this, when you look at the prices and the scarcity of resources when it comes to preventative medicine, this is close to impossible
Mm-hmm.
because it's too expensive, because there aren't enough doctors, because
Right.
very few people know what they're talking about, and it's just not feasible right now. However, what you can do is apply AI and to train AI to work like a preventative medicine assistant and to create automation on so many processes, on data collection, on blood labs, on different warnings or alerts that it raises when your different biomarkers are going off road, So so we really believe that we can execute on this vision once we have an AI that it is able to considerably help medical doctors in their mission to
Mm-hmm.
bring preventative medicine to the masses. So that's what we are trying to do. In order to do that, right now, what we have done is create a platform, start aggregating data and
Mm-hmm.
helping patients live 100 years in good health, thanks to the last breakthroughs in preventative medicine. So once we gather enough data from this minimal viable MVP, minimum viable product, I would call it,
Mm-hmm.
we would be able to train our AI based on those data sets and then make it available to the masses and to lower the price, which is honestly fairly high for like people from India or China or so many other countries that
Mm-hmm.
don't have the privilege to be able to afford that kind of service.
Are you creating an AI tool or are you using an AI tool or what? I guess what's your approach is.
Well, right now what we're doing is adding bricks of AI corresponding to different processes and steps that the medical doctors have to do it by hand. Let me
Hmm.
give you some examples.
Okay.
So, and patients, by the way, also. Um, after okay, so after a consultation, which takes roughly 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
the medical doctor is supposed to write a report of
Yep.
what has been said, of the conclusions, the recommendations, and everything. This takes roughly another 30 minutes of their time. With AI, you can easily record, with the approval, of course, of the patient, you can easily record the voice and the conversation going on between the medical doctor and the patient,
Mm-hmm.
and then create a summary of it
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
completely automatically. So you use speech to text, you turn it into a text, and then you use ChatGPT like software to summarize the whole
Mm-hmm.
conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So that saves doctors half of their time, the time they should use in order to do that consultation and to write the report. So that's one example. Another example, you're supposed in preventative medicine, you're supposed to do a whole set of tests, blood labs, and
Mm-hmm.
VO2 max, and so many others. the doctor has to, so you have PDFs, right? Papers. So you have to print them or you have to read them. And it's a long process and not very straightforward process. What you could do is take that data and put it exactly in a database and then eventually process it and display it in a very readable, easily readable format for the medical doctor. So we are working on a process, on a brick, in our whole process to optimize this portion also. So when you look at the whole,
Hmm.
everything the medical doctor is doing, you have all those kind of units here and there that can be replaced by AI. And we are trying to do this little by little, helping medical doctors being more and more efficient and being able
Hmm.
to handle more and more patients. And at some point, we would have a huge dashboard with all sorts of different biomarkers and indicators, key performance indicators, showing green, orange, or red, according to if those biomarkers are okay off-road or if they're going in the wrong or right direction.
Hmm.
And this would be helping a lot of medical doctors to raise alarms, to understand things that are not right, and also
Hmm.
patients to do the, like what I would say, the 80-20, like the 20% of things they're supposed to do that are supposed to generate 80% of the measures. Like, for example, if you're in an age range that exposes you to a high risk of cancer, you would like to have cancer exams like every 3 months or every 6 months.
Hmm.
If you haven't done it, AI could easily understand that this is the most important priority for you right now,
Hmm.
according to your data, according to your age range, according to your family history, and so many other data
Hmm.
points. And this again, a doctor could do it, but AI could do it better and at less and much cheaper.
Okay.
So those are different examples of
Okay.
what we're doing with AI right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the I'm sure you thought about this too, but at least the research that I've done for the U.S. because of the decreasing health span that I talked about, chronic diseases and such, we are spending so much as a country on fixing from a healthcare standpoint. If we're able to basically do what you're talking about, then you've got all these funds available to start doing the preventative care instead of waiting until you're broken. Get the preventive care done up front. So, in theory, it should be a lot less expensive in the
Yeah.
long run.
Yeah, there are two reasons why this is happening. The first one is that medicine, since Pasteur, like in by the end of the 19th century, he discovered modern medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So modern medicine for more than a century worked in the following way. You isolate the organ that is supposed to be unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
and you try to treat it independently from the rest of the body.
Right.
And we do this because the human body is very complex, and understandably, medicine wasn't able to understand the whole body, so they isolated one organ and tried to work on that and to fix it. And it worked great. By the way, we have multiplied our health span by 2 or 3 since the end of the 19th century. So it was a great deal. But now we are getting to a stage where we need to take into account the interactions, complex interactions between the different organs. And so that was very difficult to do until we started having those AI models that we are, that are very recent
Mm-hmm.
and that start to understand the whole complexity of human organisms. So because of that, we would wait until an organ is sick. And so that's, this is why preventative medicine didn't work before, because we would wait until something isn't working, we would identify what is not working, and we
Mm-hmm.
would try to improve that specific point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one reason, like the historical reason and the scientific reason. There's another reason. The other reason is that the big pharma has developed business models around waiting for people to be unhealthy and to be sick before they would cure them.
Right.
And this is how it's working. Again, I understand the laws of business, I understand everything. I've been there. So it's not to criticize anything, it's just to explain, to try to understand what things are going. I think we can change this. First, because AI is allowing us to understand the very complex interaction between our 81 organs. We have, by the way, like 81 organs in our body. So that's one thing. And the second thing, Big Pharma is starting to understand, and we have some responsibility to accelerate the pace, but it's already happening. They understand that on the short term, they could be treating the people who are sick and most of the time aged, so this is going to continue for a while, but they could also have an enormous business opportunity in treating preventable diseases right now and to generate profit right now. And again, you know how markets are and how this world is working. Everyone is focused on short-term goals and short-term profit. So we are offering them exactly what they need, short-term profit, right? So again, just to give you an example, pre-diabetes. I happen to be pre-diabetic, so I know this health condition very well. My mom has type 2 diabetes. I have a genetic predisposition to type 2 diabetes, so I've been studying this at great depth. There's in France roughly 10 to 15% of people who are metabolically unhealthy and most likely pre-diabetic, but they don't know about it.
Right.
What about instead of treating the people with type 2 diabetes right now, we would treat also 15% of the population in preventative mode. That would be great. That would be a great investment opportunity for Big Pharma and a great business opportunity. So one of the things we're working on right now is to make a business case out of this and convince Big Pharma to invest in this preventative medicine, not for the sake of humanity, but to increase their profit. And at the same time, improve the overall health in the population, which is great. You do everything. You increase your revenue, and by the way, you also improve the health of the general population.
So are you familiar? So in the States here, there's a couple of gentlemen that I follow. So one of them is Dr. Mark Hyman. Have you heard that name before? So he's
absolutely great guy.
Yeah. So he's created. I mean, this isn't affordable by everybody, and I don't think it's covered by any healthcare plans either. But he has this function health organization he created that does measures 100 different markers in your body. It's like basically $499, $500, get it done twice a year. And it's the purpose is to kind of like what you're saying from a preventative standpoint, say, okay, you have these markers, you're predisposed to whatever, cancer or diabetes, type 2 diabetes, whatever the issue is. So you can start to address it now versus when, the illness. So that's
great.
Yeah, so he's got that going, but it's not covered by my health insurance. I don't know if it's covered by anybody's health insurance, but at least people are starting to think about what you're talking about here, which is fantastic. Kind of getting more into the.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah, I'm super excited to see such initiatives that are honestly not that expensive. $500 twice a year is acceptable when you put it in perspective of what it's going to save you financially and in terms of your health,
right,
and well-being, general well-being in 10 years.
Yeah. So what do you think your biggest challenge is right now to kind of get to this 2060 goal?
I would say is execution.
Okay.
We need to wisely balance short-term projects with long-term goals. And it's not very easy to do. It requires a lot of adjustment. People in general, it's very hard to sort of motivate them to take today the measures that they need to take in order to have a better health in 20 or 30 years. So I've seen so many things that I've been very frustrated about, because from the rational point of view, they should act. And you demonstrate that you prove to them that they need to act, but they still don't act. So it was a very, very difficult thing to understand to me and to accept the very human nature of our species, so focused on the short term.
Yes.
So how to motivate them to take measures when everything seems to be fine, nothing hurts, and they don't have any symptoms? That turns out to be a tough challenge. So that was something that was very difficult, and I still struggle with this. I think I've understood some mechanisms that allow us to bring people in such a situation where they say, okay, I understand, so let's get things done right now.
Mhm.
But it's still not mainstream, and I don't have the magic recipe that is going to work for a significant portion of like the citizens.
Okay. Yeah. And I've talked to, interviewed a couple doctors, and they basically said that the biggest thing, you calling it execution, they call it the why. Why would you want to change behavior, or why would you want to do these tests? So that if you can understand the why for a person, which when you're talking about 30-minute appointments, if you can make that 45 or 50 and have AI do the notes like you're talking about, then you can have a more holistic conversation with the patient to get it. Because everybody has a why. I mean, spend time with your grandkids. You're kind of my why. But so, I mean, if you can uncover that, then that gives them motivation to want to change. But it's not easy.
Yeah, it's part of the equation, clearly. But I honestly I think it's not enough. So basically, what works with us right now is to talk to people who are roughly 40 or more.
Mm-hmm.
At 40, you have a sort of tipping point in your existence where your parents are starting to be unhealthy, to get sick, to have some chronic diseases.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, you theoretically speaking, you know that this is going to happen, but right now it's close to you, and so you start to feeling it in your gut. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something very important. Second, you reach like your peak shape by 40. So from that point on, you're going to decrease your performances, your health, everything. So you sort of feel that right now in your blood. It's not just in theory; you just feel it. When you run like a marathon, at some point you were at 4 hours. Right now you're at four hours and 30 minutes and stuff like so. So you start understanding that you have some limitations and you're going down the road from that point. So that's another thing. And unfortunately, for some people, they have accidents themselves, heart attacks,
Mm-hmm.
type 2 diabetes, burnouts, stuff like that. So this again reminds them that they definitely need to take care of themselves right now, not in 5 years or 10 years or tomorrow, right now.
Right. Right.
But that's not enough. They need to have a financial stability that allows them to take care of what's going to happen in 10 years and not by the end of the month to pay their
Mm-hmm.
bills.
Right.
So when you have those two conditions, financial stability, not saying wealth or anything, but still some stability, and you kind of have some people that are have some diseases around you or yourself,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of puts you under pressure, and you start taking care of this very, very seriously.
Well, that's the reason I started this podcast. Well, one of the reasons I started this podcast was because I had a health scare. And if I hadn't been in good physical shape, eating well, all the things that we're kind of talking about here, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I mean, basically, this kind of longevity conversation we're having here, just the health span piece, not the future pieces. If I continue to do this show, so
That's great. It's thank you for your initiative. Again, right now I have like a life mission. It's not a business, it's not a company. It's
Mhm.
something that I really want to get done for the sake of humanity.
It's very, very, very noble. And
And
the
and
other kind of, yeah, the other half of this is we're trying to get, because you're talking about people being financially stable over the age of 40, and then they've got some other parents or something else that happens at that age. There are people that don't have financial stability, they don't have access to health care, they don't have access to, so there's a whole part, at least in the US here, I'm not sure how it is in France, but a whole part of the
right.
population here that is, they just don't have the means, the tools, the access to change anything. So that's kind of the other part of the mission for what we're trying to do now. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this.
let's keep talking about longevity here. So there's the blue zones. I'm sure you're familiar with the blue zones. And you actually had in France this woman, Jean Louise Calmette. I'm sure you're very familiar with her.
Sure.
Lived to be 122, but she didn't do everything right based on what science is telling us today. So she smoked, she drank, but she managed to live to be 122. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are around kind of her, because a lot of people have studied her, especially in the longevity space here over the last
Yeah.
couple of years.
Yeah, so listen, it's really fascinating. We've been looking for decades for a miracle gene that we would modify and which would lengthen our health spans by, say, 10 years, and we've never discovered that, and most likely it just doesn't exist. So it's there are a lot of factors that are coming into play when it comes to longevity, and each one of us seems to cope with their own magic recipe to increase their health span or to bring their health span to a certain degree. And for Jeanne Calment, maybe she had the right genes, and then she was lucky enough to live in the right place and to have, there's a portion of luck that we cannot just simply just cannot ignore about it. I'm looking, so being a science guy myself and a technical guy myself, I'm trying to take more into consideration the statistical nature of this reality instead of different examples. Because my grandmother, for example, same thing. She smoked until 75, and then she decided to stop like all of a sudden, and she was able to do this after decades of addiction, and she lived until 87. So it's a great age.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, she was still healthy when she died. We didn't know exactly. She didn't have any chronic condition other than neurodegenerative disease, Alzheimer's. But you don't die of that. It was not the reason of dying. So again, those are examples, and not the best examples. But statistically speaking, again, we have studies that show the right things we need to do in order to maximize our likelihood to live longer and healthier. So I really think it's not easy, but we should be looking at statistics rather than examples.
I agree. And there's a company that I came across in my travels this week. They're based in Boston, and like they are asking permissions. In the case of Gene, they're basically asking the family when that person passes away if they can get a blood sample from that person. They're putting it into a database so people that are living longer. So they're collecting information on the genome of the people that are living longer. They're using AI to analyze that, and they're hoping to come up, but they don't have answers yet, but they're hoping to maybe build a big enough database that they can say this is why these individuals live longer. So to try to get some definition around that.
Yeah, I really hope they will find something. We haven't found anything so far in this direction. But again, until you haven't discovered something, you need to look everywhere.
Right, right. So you think it had anything to do with the French food in this case?
I think it's one of the factors. You have this brilliant medical doctor. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's called Peter Attia. He's
Yes.
American, living in Texas, and
Yeah.
he's to my arguably to my in my opinion the best medical doctor in longevity we have in the world right now.
Mm.
He's very knowledgeable about this. He's
Yep.
not he's realistic. He doesn't do any marketing bullshit. It's a great guy. I really
Mm-hmm.
love what like his mindset and how he's explaining things to lay people like us. So he's talking about 5 levels of intervention, and each one of them is important. And the whole mix is going to generate positive results in when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to health span. First is physical activity.
Yes.
Second is diet. Third is sleep, so important.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth is mental health, stress management, and how great your relationships are, and stuff, and so on. And fifth is supplements and drugs. And I mean, the most impactful is physical activity, and the second most impactful is diet. So, yes, the answer is yes. It's very impactful, and it's certainly part of the answer.
Yeah. See, and I've read Peter's book. I've listened to some of his podcasts. I agree with that. I think he's great. I disagree with exercise first and food second. I think it's food first and exercise
Oh,
second.
yes, yes, absolutely. Okay, I agree. I agree. It's one or the other. It doesn't matter. They are on
But,
top of the list, and you need to take care of
yeah,
them
and
both.
I agree. You need to kind of consider all those factors. I mean, that's
Yeah.
part of it. It's not one magic bullet. You've got to kind of do this group of things to increase your longevity. So I love the
Yeah.
French food, so I just had to ask a question about the French food. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And there's maybe something else which is related to stress management.
hmm
of course, there are stressed people everywhere in the world, but in France, you have this culture of not giving a shit. Sorry for the expression, but most of the people, they are working. Like in Italy, you have the same mindset. You have different countries here in the south of Europe, where Greece also to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
People are just living their lives. They're taking care of the present moment. They
Mm-hmm.
don't really care so much about what's going to happen in the future, and they find a sort of balance and reduce their stress levels. And they invest a lot of their time and effort in meaningful relationships also.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is part of the answer why health is better than in other countries. Again, it's not the best one, but we have some good points here.
I couldn't agree more. When we went to Paris, I don't remember, it was this year. Like, we've been twice last 2 years, and it was like a Friday night. My wife and I went to dinner. It was along a canal. I forget the exact location,
Yeah.
and just there were just people out everywhere, just sitting along the canal. And I took a picture and I sent it to my son. Just a group of, like, I don't know, 6 or 8, 12 young individuals sitting around a circle. Everybody had something they were eating. They had a bottle of wine. They had a deck of cards, and they're just enjoying each other's company and eating and
Mm.
drink. I mean, it was just, you don't see that here. So I guess that's kind of, I mean, and it was for miles along that canal that, this kind of stuff was
Yeah, yeah, I know,
happening. There
I
was
know.
no
I've
concert. There was no event. They were just, the event was them. I mean, just them and their group
yeah.
of friends.
Yeah, I was one of them a couple of years ago. Right now, I'm living in the south of France. I've moved for good reason. Here, life is even better than in Paris. Less pollution, a lot of trees, forests, and everything. The sea is not far away. The mountains also, so it's better right now. But at that point, it was the best place to be for me in Paris. So I was one of these people maybe a couple of years ago.
So just, but I had a podcast I released for the holidays, and we were just talking about loneliness. I mean, that is it's like an epidemic now. I mean, it's just, if
Mm.
people aren't interacting and having conversations and, doing things with other people, it's, you can't live a long, healthy life being lonely. So another person I wanted to ask you about was Peter Diamandis. Are you familiar with Peter? Kind of the work
Sure,
he's
sure,
doing?
great guy, great
Yeah.
guy. I'm admiring this guy a lot. He's my role model in some aspects.
So he's actually, because I was thinking about this when I was kind of doing research on you, and you've got the foundation, and then he's got, I'm sure you're familiar, he's got an X Prize for health and longevity. So I don't know if you ever researched that, talked to your colleagues
Yes,
about it, or.
yes, I almost invested in their healthspan prize, which is ongoing right now. Yes, honestly, it's a source of inspiration. I think there needs to be more such initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
maybe on on different continents, different approaches. But it's what he's doing is really great. And basically, I think we should have one such organization in every country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to have, of course, big organizations that are worldwide, but at the same time, we also need to act on a local level. Because, for example, in France, you have a political system, you have different organizations, you have the administration, and you need to be there to change things.
Right.
So it's not enough to have something that is happening somewhere in the world, be it in the United States or Singapore or China or the Middle East. You need to have such organizations in every country.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, and more. It gets back to even the lonely. I mean, people need to be talking more, not only here in Cleveland or in Ohio or the U.S., but even, understanding what's happening in France, understanding what's happening in Singapore and such. I mean, it's we have the means to be able to communicate globally. We should be doing it much, much more often, in my opinion. So the last couple of questions here are kind of focused on the food topic. So, because what my passion is for a lot of reasons. So I've, interviewed chefs, doctors, farmers. There's a lot of conversations I've had recently with some farmers, actually a gentleman in Kenya recently. So they're trying to do more regenerative farming, because I've met Dr. Hyman a couple of times, and I keep asking about, like you mentioned, Peter Attia talks about supplements, And one of the reasons we have to take supplements is because the food we're growing, at least in the US, I'm not sure about France, but the food
Okay.
we're growing in the US is deplete of nutrients that 100 years ago. So one conversation I had, he said basically the head of broccoli you buy today has 1/5 the nutrients if you bought it, 50 years ago because of the way it's being grown. So one of the ways to kind of, if we can grow healthier, more nutrient dense food, we're going to need fewer supplements, I guess is kind of just a comment. But I guess, what are your thoughts just on the food aspect of kind of what we're talking about here today is the question.
Honestly, it's very hard to eat healthy, even in countries like France. I think United States honestly is even worse. And I don't have the right solution for this. I have like different tips and tricks, but ideally, you would grow today. I mean, if you want to be sure that you have the best quality for your vegetables, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
fruits, you need to grow them basically in your backyard. And
Mm-hmm.
this is very complicated for so many reasons. So this is not practical until we are able to do this. Like, for example, even like as to your point, the apples that we eat today have like 5 times more sugar, more fructose that they had like 100 years ago,
Yes.
because they have mixed them and modified them until they would appeal to the taste of the population, which generally speaking wants as much sugar as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we have less nutrients and we have those sugars and that are completely destroying our health. So this is a big problem. Again, I don't have a solution right now. I know that every time I travel or I eat outside of my house, basically I don't control anything, and I've given up any expectation when it comes to eating healthy outside of my home. And of course, I'm buying how do you call this, biological agriculture, or I don't know what they are supposed to put less pesticides and
Yeah. Here we
to
call it regenerative organic
yeah,
agriculture.
organic. Yes, that's
Yeah.
the term. Organic food, it's more expensive, but even if we're with organic food, I'm not convinced that this is not just a marketing strategy to sort of sell food that is only a little bit better, like twice or 3 times as expensive as the basic one is. So I have a big question. I'm frustrated with not having an answer. So I'm still looking for an answer, and I'll be sure to let you know the answer as soon as I find it. And
Yeah.
would be very interested, by the way, what your opinion is about it, because here I haven't found anything that could greatly help in this aspect.
I guess just some of the conversations that I've had with other guests. I mean, get to know your farmers. One kind of piece of advice that many people have given, because if you have a relationship with your farmer, go to a farmer's market. I mean, you have a lot of those in France. I mean, kind of every town has a large farmer's market. Get to know the farmers, ask them questions, understand how they're growing their crops and their food is one. Two, there's an organization, a gentleman I just interviewed a couple of weeks ago too, from the Rodell Institute. So they're trying to work with farmers basically on regenerative agriculture so they don't need the chemicals and still get, the better nutrient results. So there's efforts underway and they're educating people around the globe, quite honestly, on how to do that. And then they're also working with the US government. So right now there is a USDA organic stamp that gets put on food. So if it's grown without pesticides and grown organically, that's, if you see that, so that you don't just look for the word organic. That could just be a marketing thing. But if it has that
Mm,
stamp on it, then you know it's grown without pesticides.
interesting.
And I'll say approved by the USDA here in the US. And then they're trying to get a second organic regenerative stamp created for farmers that not only don't use pesticides, but they don't till, they use compost. They've got animals. They've got this whole, ecosystem that some farmers have created to kind of grow their food in. So that's kind of
That's
directionally the way things are going in the U.S. And then based on the election and this RFK gentleman that's coming into office, there's hope that he's going to do even more in that space. So
yeah.
I mean, you still can have a small. I mean, I've got a patio outside my door here, and I've got a little box, and when it's not snowing out, because it is snowing here in Cleveland, but I grow things in it, and so I mean, it's not going to feed me every day of the week, but it is, it is something you can do to kind of, start doing something in your own home.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Great insights. And to your point, I think this idea of creating a label or creating a rank, a sort of score, is very important, because once people start understanding that they need to take care of this, and you have an easy to understand mechanisms, a
Mm-hmm.
system to see whether the food you're buying is longevity friendly or not. I
Right.
mean, the business and economy is going to be is going to do the rest of the work. Simply, brands are going to understand that they need to produce that kind of food, and then consumers are going to buy that food. So it's going to generate more profit for the companies, and we are going to have a positive loop that is going to enforce itself
Mm-hmm.
over time.
Yeah, I would say in the US too, younger adults, I had this conversation at dinner last night with somebody else, but keep getting confused on the different millennials, Gen X, alphas. There's so many different categories now but anyways, younger adults now are, I'll just say in that 18 to 34 age range care a lot more about what food they eat, what's in their food. They're paying attention to labels and ingredients. So it's, at least here in the US, more people are paying attention to that right now, which is good.
So basically, what you are doing right now, which is bringing to your audience those kind of discussions,
Mm-hmm.
is maybe what we really need to do. Maybe this is the answer again, because if they want healthy food, they will select those labels, and
Mm-hmm.
the companies are going to produce more of what is selling.
Yeah.
Simply put.
Exactly. If you create the demand, then they're going to have to change. That's kind of my. So there are people out there that are, I'll say, attacking some of these large organizations that are selling or producing unhealthy food. My approach is do the education. If people want to buy more fruits and vegetables, if they want to buy different products, then the companies will have to change.
You vote every day with your credit card. This is
Exactly.
what they say.
Exactly. So just before we get to the recipe, what if somebody wanted to start down a longevity path tomorrow? This is January. Everybody's thinking about, New Year's resolutions and that kind of thing. What would you recommend to be the first step they could take? They're
Yeah.
going to do one thing tomorrow.
Yeah, so there are some very basic steps that everyone can take, and that are basically going to work for everyone,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm going to give some examples.
Okay.
Once you do those kind of essentials, if you want to go further, you need a medical doctor with expertise in
Mm-hmm.
longevity for sure, because then you get into personalization, you
Mm-hmm.
get into blood labs that need to be interpreted, you get into the complexities of the human organism, which is very, very difficult to
Mm-hmm.
encompass, even for professional healthcare doctors. So the basic stuff is um, less processed foods.
Yes.
That is easy to understand, and everyone can apply this.
Mm-hmm.
Less sugar,
Mm-hmm.
say. This is going to basically be great for everyone, although not to the same degree, but if you do that, you won't hurt yourself, guaranteed.
Right.
Other things that are very easy to put in place by a sort of everyone has those watches right now. I mean, not specifically this one, but
Yep.
yeah, or even your iPhone, your
Yep.
your smartphone,
Mm-hmm.
and count the number of steps you're doing every day, and make
Mm-hmm.
sure you're doing 10,000 steps per day. That's
Mm-hmm.
very basic. That's very easy to put in place, and it's going to be positive for everyone.
Yes.
You know, sleep 7 to 8 hours a day and track your sleep, because I had this problem. I thought I was sleeping well, but in fact, between the time that I'm going to bed, the time I'm really sleeping, and then I'm waking, the number of hours of effective sleep is pretty reduced. So
Mm-hmm.
I think you should track it. But even if you don't track it, just keep in mind that it's so important for you. Um, it's going to make a big difference. So
Mm-hmm.
sleep minimum 7 hours a day, a night, sorry, is something that is going to be positive in 100% of the cases.
Mm-hmm.
So those are very basic examples of what you have to do. Your stress is so important also. It kind of significantly reduces your likelihood to live long and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's more difficult to track, to be honest, but if you're able to manage it and to have like spikes of stress, which are normal, but not chronic stress, which is an overall general level of stress 24 hours a day,
Mm-hmm.
it makes a huge difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go out and see some friends. So those are very basic. Everyone knows them, and still so few people are applying them. But they work in 100% of the cases. And then you have the more sophisticated stuff, not so sophisticated, but a little bit more sophisticated, and we get into personalization. And
Mm-hmm.
in this case, you need a medical doctor with expertise in longevity.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, what recipe did you bring to share with
Oh,
our
yes. So the recipe. So I've done my homework as I was telling you because I don't know the technical words in English for that, but it's a recipe that is from here, from the south of France. It's called Ratatouille,
Uh-huh.
and it's basically a mix of different vegetables that you
Uh-huh.
put inside your prepared meal, and you would cook them. So you have to take a zucchini, eggplants, bell peppers, and tomatoes,
Mm-hmm.
and then you put some olive oil in a pot on a large pan, and then you heat that olive oil for a couple of minutes. You add some onion and garlic, um, and then you still wait for a couple of minutes. And then you put the zucchini, eggplants, bell peppers, and tomatoes, and tomatoes in dices. You cut them in dices, and then you put them into your large pan,
Okay.
and you cook it. You cook it for 5 to 7 minutes at high temperature, and then you reduce the intensity of your heating, and you wait for 25 to 30 minutes, additional minutes, and you
Okay.
stir from time to time. And then you put some pepper, eventually adjust if you still need more salt or olive oil, and
Mm-hmm.
you have your ratatouille. It's a
Okay.
great recipe. I really love it, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to eat healthy and discover some French food.
Nice. Very nice. I think there was a movie by that name as well, wasn't there?
Ratatouille, absolutely, yes, with
Yeah.
a small mice.
Yes. Yes. My kids love that movie.
Yes, I've seen it with my kids also.
My kids are adults now and they still watch it from time to
Yeah,
time.
my
So
kids are still kids, 3 and 6, right? So uh, they're
very
still
nice.
very young.
Very nice. That's how I have a 2-year-old grandson and a 7-year-old grandson. So I'm a little bit ahead of you there.
It's Yeah, it's a great pleasure in life to be able to have kids and the right health to
Mm-hmm.
play with them,
Yes. Yes.
when they are your kids and your grandkids also. And
Yeah.
Peter Attia has this brilliant methodology. He calls it the Centenarian Decathlon,
Mm-hmm.
where basically you would imagine what you would like to be able to do by 100 years old, and then you sort of retro plan where you should be right now,
Mm-hmm.
considering that as years pass by, you will be worse off every year by a small amount.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of do the math and understand where you need to be now in
Mm-hmm.
order to be where you want to be at 100 years old. And I really love the methodology and also the vision that you need to have and how you plan today as
Mm-hmm.
to what's going to come in 30, 40, 50 years from now.
Nice. So my goal, I had this conversation with my mom a couple of days ago, I'm starting at 120 and then working backwards. So
That's great. It's a great way of seeing things. And by the way, again, if we work well and we invest in the right companies and we help humanity implement technologies that we will be able to use, and at the same time do the very easy and straightforward stuff I talked about, and some
mm-hmm.
more sophisticated stuff with medical doctors telling you what exams to do and what preventative measures to take. I really think it's 100% doable.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Well,
we are the first generation of human beings for whom reaching this threshold is a realistic yet attainable goal, I think. For our parents or grandparents, it was a pipe dream. For us, it's realistic if we execute well and we are ambitious enough.
I couldn't agree more. I agree 100% with that statement. So
Thank you.
thank you very much for being on the show today, Gabriel. That was a great conversation. That's the other thing I like doing about this podcast. I learned so much talking to my guests. I mean, it's just I enjoy the conversations, but I also learn a lot too. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, Ken, again for what you're doing. I hope collectively we will be able to do something meaningful for humanity and help people live longer and healthier.
Definitely my goal. So, and I know it's your goal too. So thank you. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, I have a sponsor. That sponsor is Cleveland Kitchen, the leader in fresh fermented foods. Try Cleveland Kitchen's crunchy and delicious krauts, kimchi, and pickles packed with probiotics to support your gut health while elevating your meals from ordinary to extraordinary. Cleveland Kitchen, where taste meets wellness. Find it in the produce or deli section of your local grocery store or visit clevelandkitchen.com for more information.